Good evening, welcome to another video in the Artful Coder series. Today I want to talk about or cover clean architecture, the domain layer. So if you're not sure what clean architecture is, let's just load Paint up. So effectively, clean architecture is a series that make up different layers in an onion. So what we may have is at the core of this, you would then have another circle. So that's your outer layer. So then we draw another circle. That's your domain. So let's just put a D in here. Just put, that's your domain. And then across here, you've got your application layer. Excuse my typing. And infra. Okay, so they all kind of interconnect. Okay, excuse me. And then on the for another layer, you would then have, and they all have different aspects to a solution. So, for example, the infrastructure layer needs to know about the application layer, whereas the application layer needs to know about the domain layer. And the presentation layer, which kind of sits on the outside, again, could be a web API or Blazor client, connects to that, to your application layer, and the infrastructure handles. So the way to think about it is all of like your use cases, they sit in your application layer, whereas infrastructure things like where you might be reading files, you might be processing a spreadsheet, sit in the infrastructure layer, and they all kind of nicely link with entity framework to link up. And in your outer layer, this bit over here in this section, that might be a web API on one side, who knows what, and then a Blazor project on the outside. So what I thought we'd do is just start off with the domain layer today. So this is where your models or domain objects will sit. So we're going to create a very simple domain layer. We're not on anything too sophisticated. We're just going to create something simple to illustrate the concepts. And through later videos, we're going to get even more, start building up the application layer using Mediator and other things that you can do as well. And then we'll look at scaffolding up the database connection, setting the correct permissions, which I've done in production. So that's things like you Frenzy framework, so you want a connection that will work, that is respect security, and will work with your application. And then we'll build eventually a web API sits on top of it using minimal APIs, and we'll have a Blazor front end that will communicate with your web API over here and it all interlinks. So let's get started. So what you want to do first, as this is going to be a solution that will contain, so it's going to be lots of different .NET projects. So there's going to be a class library for the domain layer, same again for the application, same again for the infrastructure layer, and then the web API will be a classic minimal API web API, and the UI will be a Blazor application. So you're going to have lots of different solutions. So go ahead and open up Visual Studio. I so happen to have 2022 on here. Well, what we're going to do is continue without code because we want to start off the contain of what we've got. So let's go to continue without code. What you'll end up launching is just a blank Visual Studio. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to, so new project. Let's go for a new project. And this is going to be a class library. So what we're going to do is you want a class library in C#. So there's different options down here. You can type at the top class. So it'll come up, it'll do a search and it'll find the correct one. Let's do next. So here you've got two things you need to factor in. If this is the first project in the solution, so what we're going to call this is I want to do it on like a cars database or something in the real world because And you see lots of people do to-do examples about how I can do to-do lists. Fantastic, but I like to do things a bit differently. So what you're going to need to do is when you're setting this up, when you have about 10, loads of different projects as a party solution, give them something sensible naming wise. So what we're going to call this is cars.domain. You could go with cars.source domain. And then what is the overall solution going to be called? So let's call this cars. Let's have solution and project in the same directory. Let's have that. Right, yes, tick that, click next. And what version of .NET are you going to be using? At the time of recording, I only have .NET 7 installed, but you can upgrade projects at a later date to .NET 8. So let's just do 7 for now. And this has a standard support term, so it's either 6 months a year. .NET 8 has a lot longer. So let's create. So it's going to do its magic now and create the project. Second. I'll just pause this until it finishes and then I'll be back. Oh, it's finished. Okay. So what it's done out of the box is it's given us a class. So this is the start of our clean architecture solution. And I'll show you how you link that into your Unity framework using DB sets in your context. So let's just delete this class one. It looks a bit noisy. Blank class library there. So let's add a folder. Structure is very important when you're creating coded solutions. So I tend to stick with core, and then you could then branch into another layer, another folder. And what is the core? So let's create a new folder called, if we want different things here, so let's call it cars. Let's rename this actually as models, because you might have other things you want to put in here. So let's say cars. Do that, come back up here, and I want to rename that to models. So get into the habit from early on of putting it's just a folder structure and then it affects the namespace. So let's do a new class file. So there's lots of things you could do with interfaces and dependency injection, all that. So we'll just go with a simple class for a minute. So what is this going to be called? So car. Let's create a class called car. So we're just going to start off very simply. So we have our model, our first model. So we have our first model, class car. So what things in the real world, just pause the video for a minute and have a think about what attributes or properties or elements a car has. For example, you might have number of wheels, you might have colour. So let's just go ahead and create some properties for this. So when you're line this up for database creation, you've got to think about that as well. So what is the first thing that we're going to have in here is an identifier. And this typically is an int and it's car ID, because if you want to start using foreign keys in different tables, you're going to need that. So let's keep it simple. Let's create a public string and let's call it make. It would probably, for simplicity, we'll do it this way, but you'd have a navigation property to a list of makes and a list of models. But just to keep this so we do a simple solution to get the concepts and stuff, we'll do that. And then we will have public string model set. And then we're going to have, let's have another int number of wheels. Again, it's just a property. And we've got make, models, number of wheels. And again, you probably have a look at the colours. So let's go string colour. And notice the naming convention I'm using here for properties. So a property is a getter and setter. So it allow in the background as a getter or and a setter. And what that means is historically you'd write methods that say, here's my integer of, or my string of make, let's write set make, set get make, and then you'd have your functions to set that up. But now these properties do it in one go. So that is very simple. We're not going to start going down relational databases just yet until we get a bit more further on. So if I save all of that now, it won't do anything, but what we've got here is we've got a car. And if there's certain things that you wanted for dependency injection, the good thing about the way we structured this is if I wanted for some reason I wanted an interface into the main layer, I would come down to here, do new folder, interfaces, and go into there and create a new folder. Always think about structure when you're doing your projects, because as they become bigger, they become more unwieldy. So you need to think about what you're trying to represent. So an interface is effectively a class, but with a prefix of I, so it shows interface. So what we've got here is car. And what is the car going to have? So it might have all of these properties here. This isn't the best way to show this because technically the domain A you wouldn't do this, but I just want to show you this is a possibility. So you copy all those across, here it's public, and then all you've got to do to get it to inherit from cars is come over here, implement it rather, not inherit, and it will put the namespace in there for you automatically. So let's just get rid of that a minute, put two of them in there. So you can now see, and if I was to then say, well, actually on our interface, we want public string, if I can type, regno. We want to know a year of registration. There's all sorts of things you can do. So now what we should find, if this has done this right, yes, because we're implementing this iCar interface, it doesn't have the regno. So this is what interfaces. There's lots of reasons for dependency injection, but then we just simply say public string type regno get set. Okay, so now we shouldn't get any errors. So that's it. That is our domain layer with one model in there. We're not confusing it. We're not going to do anything too sophisticated and things like that. We're just going to keep a simple model structure of cars. With that, we have an internal identifier. And the other thing I will quickly show you is if you want to do this entity framework, how long do you want to put restrictions? So we can say on here, max length, let's have of 100. So we have a make then. What this will do in the database is this will affect, let's have a length of 100, and let's say color, let's have a length of 10 or 20 actually, so we might get some weird one with colors. Regno, what is that? That's roughly about 8. So this will say, let's say length 10. And what this says is to your entity framework later on in the videos that you want these strings to be max lengths. And if you said that you do not want it can be nullable, you simply put in here a question mark. Hang on, not there, it's somewhere along here anyway. Let's have a look. Hang on. There you go. So it doesn't match our interface, or yes, it's complaining because we've not got a null on that. So if we wanted to allow this to be null, so if we just want you put a question mark in front of it to denote it as nullable. So let's just refresh, that's model, and let's just see if this will allow it in here as well. Okay, that's it, so that warning's gone away. So you may get things about non-nullable, which you can initiate it in the constructor, or you can set it when you're setting a car up. But that is effectively the domain layer written, and as we build this solution up, you'll then start to see application, you'll start to see infrastructure, you'll start to see the web API, we'll get it hooked up to a database, and we'll start having a UI to manage that using Blazor, which I really do like. I've been using it in production as part of my career for a while now, a good while now, and I'm really liking it, how it handles certain stuff. There's a few gotchas and things like that, but yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've really enjoyed this video.